Hey all, and welcome to today's lecture on organizational assimilation. This actually is one of my favorite lectures. It's one of my favorite parts of ORCOM. I think it is very revealing for the communicative process that we go through, and that includes the strategies as well. So today, my name is Tyler Sorg, and I will help you kind of get guided through the 4 phases of organizational assimilation, but also, what this means for organizational culture and also control. So first, let's go ahead and define what assimilation actually is. So the big boom of this kind of came from Joplin. And Joplin describes assimilation as it's a process in which new members of an organization integrate into that org culture. Now, Kramer and Daly further this explanation and talk about assimilation being the process of joining, participating, and then leaving organizations. So to make this, I guess, clear and understand what actually assimilation is, it's the process of learning the ropes, right? It's getting acquainted, becoming more knowledgeable on that org culture. You also learn a few things along the way. You learn the org culture. You learn the artifacts, right? We tend to think about learning the ins and outs of a company, but we learn a lot of things. The artifacts, that goes from the actual material items that people wear, the stuff on the wall, the values. It's a big part of actually becoming assimilated is we learn the values of the organization. Now, I will talk about this a little bit deeper in the next few slides, but that can be a good thing and also a bad thing. Next, we learn the beliefs. What are the actual beliefs here of the organization? That goes deeper than just externally. It goes internally as well. Also, we're going to learn about the communication that takes place in that organization. And Keaton talks about the assumptions of that organization. Now, we think about this in regard to learning the culture. It's a process of fitting in. It's a process of becoming a part of that culture. Now, that means learning the good things and also the bad things. How to speak good things, how to speak bad things. But again, this is the learning the ropes process, as Kramer and Daly talk about in the book chapter there. But again, it's a way of getting into that organization. There are 4 phases of assimilation that Joplin talks about. The first one here, anticipatory. Second one here, encounter. Third one, metamorphosis, and the next one is exit. But again, this is a process of becoming adapted to that organization. So first, let's go ahead and talk about anticipatory assimilation. This takes place in 2 parts. We have a role socialization part there, and also a socialization of that organization. Now, think about this. This is all taking place before you are a member of that organization, okay? This is before you even get hired. What Joplin suggests is that we are constantly being socialized and constantly being exposed to these roles by our family, right? Our education, our peers, our previous experiences with that job, and also media influence. Think about this. I really thought that being a professor was like Indiana Jones, I swear. I actually have a book back here somewhere that actually would back me up on that. I really thought that, being a professor was like that traveling the world, you had a cool leather bag, and that was all socialized upon me by media. Also, I thought what it meant to be a doctor, what it meant to be a lawyer, from my family, from my peers, from my experiences talking to doctors, right? So again, we are constantly being socialized and constructed to have a preconceived idea of that job before getting that job, right? I know a lot of you who watch this video are professors, and we all were told by our families and our friends, wow, what a great job it is. You do this, you do that. So we're being exposed to that. We're being assimilated in a way before we even get to that job. Now, the issue with this is that it can happen in twofold. Typically, we get the most incorrect views of what it means to be X, right? What it means to be Y. And this is all a incoherent but collective preview of that job. I used to work in sales, and I thought that sales was like the guys you see on TV. I thought it was Paul Newman in The Hustler, right? You go travel, you play some pool, you make some sales, life is good. But when you get there, I'll get to that next, it's not always what you see. Or it can take place by the organization, right? They go out there and they pick who they think would be a best fit for that culture, who they feel would be a best fit to do the job and to be a good fit for that job, but also vice versa. We also pick jobs that we feel we would be good at. Now, an article done by Gibson and Papa talk about this steel mill that was the main employer of this small town. And as you can guess, that was constantly being socialized amongst the young men in that town. They're constantly being told that, hey, you got to work here. You need to do this and do that. And they're being socialized by the values and the beliefs of that organization. Now, stage 2 is now you're in it. Okay, now you are actually in the culture. You are now being exposed to the ins and outs of that organization. So think about the encounter phase, as Joblin says. It's the onboarding process. It's the first few days of the individual becoming a newcomer, right? They're now new to the organization, and now you are being exposed to their, is there Indiana Jones there, right? Is sales this way? Is being a doctor this way? Not being exposed. But again, you're constantly trying to learn the ins and outs of that organization so that you can assimilate in, right? Now, members can be very proactive. They can watch, they can observe, they can use techniques, tactics, but also strategies to become more assimilated. We talk about, brown nosing, right? This is right here. This is what we see right here. People try to imitate and do the best that they can do to get involved in that culture, right? They can ask questions. They can ask other third parties questions about that job that will help them get involved in that particular role. Back to my experience doing sales, a buddy of mine would do sales, and I would call him and say, "Hey Johnny, how do I do this? How do I do that?" And I was constantly trying to become more and more exposed to that culture. Now, in this process, you are learning the cultural norms of that organization. You are learning what they do, what they don't do. Along with this, you learn some good things, but also some bad things. I argue here that there's been more research looking at the negative processes of becoming assimilated, right? The alcohol use, the toxic communication, right? We see it a lot in sexual harassment where people begin to enact their own cultural views, their own larger meaning views of the world to be more masculine, to be more of a guy, to be more of this, to be more of that. But again, it is the process of encountering that culture. The next phase will be the metamorphosis stage. Now you made it. Now you are a part of that organization. You are no longer a newcomer, okay? And going back to my previous slide about performing, you're now engaging in that culture. Now you've done it. Now you've actually done all the processes to become assimilated, right? You are now an insider. You are a part of that organization. Now, here's where I see the biggest issues with assimilation, but also socialization. Kramer argues that, we are constantly being socialized. We have no option to assimilate. We do what we're told. We wear the shirts. We talk the lingo, to believe the values, believe the artifacts, that we're constantly being pushed that upon us, right? We're constantly being socialized by the organization. And I tend to agree with that. I tend to agree that if you want to be a part of said culture, you must exercise their values. You must have a realistic expectation for yourself, but also for yourself being viewed at by that organization, right? So now you have to do what you feel is correct and aligned with that culture. Now, back to my slide before, we see sexual harassment, racism, bullying. These are all toxic traits, but also enacted values of organizations that are exercised and engaged by members to fully assimilate into that culture, okay? But when you're in this stage here, now people come to you and ask about, hey dude, how do I do this? How do I do that? You are now a member, okay? Finally, the final stage is the exit of the culture, okay? It can happen in two ways. You can voluntarily leave. You have a planned exit. you have a shock. Maybe you got into that culture and said, you know what, wasn't for me. Maybe it wasn't for you, and then you leave that. But it is a gradual fracture from the organization. Over time, you realize that, hey, you know what? I cannot assimilate correctly, and if I don't leave now, maybe I'll be pushed out, which is involuntary. We see layoffs, termination. They did not adapt to that culture, okay? And typically we see stuff like this where it's like you are encouraged to quit. You'd be happier here, you'd be happier there. But again, that goes back to this understanding of, you did not fully assimilate. You did not get into that culture, and in turn, you were asked to leave. Okay, everybody, that is my lecture on assimilation. Any questions at all, you could probably ask right now. Thank you very much.